Winning Plays Podcast is back yet again because the NBA never sleeps. My name is Brian Robb, joined alongside once again by Tim McKone of 98.5 The Sports Hub. And Tim, we didn't think we'd have to send out the bat signal on September 1st, but lo and behold, Danny Ainge from the clouds sending Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland, a place I don't think really. The last thing I read about Cleveland in these talks was like they were out of these talks, and so lo and behold, they're in it. Blockbuster deal. What's first of all, thanks for coming aboard. Thanks for joining
always,
on in the dog days.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Not even the dog days.
No, no dog days, right?
I'll tell you what too, like, but I feel like we use Woj Bomb all the time. It was one of those ones where I'm like triple checking. I'm like, wait, is this a real account here? Did this actually just happen? And the Cavs to me came out of nowhere for this deal with Donovan Mitchell too. So yeah, there was a lot to unpack when you first saw this tweet. And I think we've kind of become like desensitized a little bit to some of the tea leaves. And, you heard the rumors like, Donovan Mitchell took the Jazz out of his profile and this and that. And you're like, all right, yeah, sure. Nothing's going to happen. And sure enough, this bomb drops this afternoon and it just crazy stuff. Like you said, the NBA, it never sleeps.
Never sleeps. Wild. It's like, yeah, Kevin Durant staying put. Okay, Donovan Mitchell, you're up. Like, let's
let's go.
Let's get this. Let's patch the gap to the start racing. So we're going to talk about this deal a little bit. We're going to talk about, I think, for the Celtics implications of this deal, which there actually are, I think, are some, maybe not so much for this season, but I think in the long term in the East, it's kind of interesting to look at now. But the deal itself, it's Mitchell, and I don't think anything else is going to Cleveland, but Utah is sending 3 unprotected first round picks, 2 pick swaps, and all this is starting in 2025 through 2029. So every other year for those, and then Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton on a sign and trade.
Yep.
Which is I think key here too. Like he can't be traded for a year now.
Right.
With the sign and trade part of this deal. So that's and then I'm honestly, and the 14th holder up, I already forgot the guy's name. I'll have to look that up in a second. But who do you like the deal more for, just on initial first impressions here when you look at each side of it?
Look, I love the young core that Cleveland has already with Garland and Mobley. I love both of those guys. I was never a huge Colin Sexton guy. Just for me, kind of felt like a volume scorer on a bad team. And I understand that obviously Sexton is not the major part of this deal. If you're Danny Ainge, no. It's the picks, right? Yes. And it's everything that's coming back. So like you mentioned, you got the 3 unprotected picks. You had the pick swaps. Here's the thing, B-Rob. I don't love this from a situation of like the core there in Cleveland is really young. So even if this Mitchell thing doesn't necessarily work out, I just find it hard to believe that this team is going to tank when you've got 2 young guys that are going to be with that organization in Garland and Mobley that I'm really high on. I think those are 2 really good players that are going to be in the fold. So I'm not sure what those picks moving forward are going to materialize to be. So ultimately, I understand that like in the NBA, it's all about these picks and the pick swaps. And from a general manager's perspective, I get exactly why you would want to do that. It makes a ton of sense rather than player for player. I'm just not sure in this case. I love the projection moving forward. Like when you go back and look at kind of the deal that we always credit Ainge for with the Nets and the Celtics, that obviously winds up landing him. And I guess we can throw out James Young, right? We won't include James Young in that haul, but Tatum, Brown, and ultimately Colin Sexton, who wound up becoming, Kyrie Irving, right? So those are the 3 picks. You nailed it, but you were also betting that this aging core for Brooklyn was going to age out. When I look at Cleveland, it's a young roster, and I'm not necessarily sure that's going to materialize. So for that reason, I actually like what Cleveland did here. I really do. I like the young core that they're going to have here moving forward a little bit. Do I think they're suddenly a contender in the Eastern Conference next year? Absolutely not. But you know what? I like the move they made. I'm not sure how much wiggle room they're going to have moving forward, by the way, with all the picks and the pick swaps they gave up. Yep. That's one thing I would be nervous about. But right now, the fact that you have a nice core here of Garland, Mitchell, and obviously Mobley, who I'm incredibly high on, I like that for Cleveland. So I'm going to say Cleveland as of right now.
You might have just had me do a 180 here in terms of how I feel about the deal. I think that is a good point in terms of the future picks and the youth they have. Like Mobley is 21 and he's entering his 2nd year. And so from 2 parts of it I like for Cleveland. One, you already talked about in terms of he's going to be there for a while. They have him under team control, for pretty much the next 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Which is obviously well into all the picks they gave up. So you at least know you're going to have Mobley there. You're probably going to have Garland there. So even if Mitchell like hates it, things blow up, you're still going to have, you know, two young guys to retool around, which is maybe not get you back to contending level, but it certainly makes it pretty tough for Utah to think that they're ever going to get like a top 5 pick down the road.
Right.
And then the other part of this I like for Cleveland is the going really aggressive to speed up the timeline when you have like an all-star on a rookie contract. I think it's something that the Celtics kind of did to a degree with Tatum and Brown, but honestly, I think they could have and should have been more aggressive at times, particularly, you know, in maybe even 2018, 2020 for sure, when they had those guys just on really good contracts at that point. So you can bring in more around them without, you know, sacrificing so much. And then because when you give those guys that big contract, that flexibility just goes away forever. And so now with Mitchell coming in, while Mobley's still only making $8 or $9 million, you have 2 or 3 years there. It's like, okay, we have the proven talent here around them, and maybe it's not the perfect fit now, but can they develop together if Mobley turns into a top 10 NBA guy and Garland keeps looking good, and maybe Mitchell's eventually just like a good second option down the road? Like that could be a team that makes some noise in the East in a couple years.
Yeah, and again, like by no stretch of the imagination am I saying that they're suddenly going to be in the conversation here to win the Eastern Conference this upcoming season. But I'm with you. Like I think if you have a nice young core like that, and you have some options here to bring in a guy like Mitchell, and also, you know, it's not necessarily flexibility because obviously you're giving up a lot of these picks, and the Celtics never truly went all in on any of these trades where they emptied the treasure chest like the Cavs just did, where all of a sudden your flexibility really is. I mean, it's tied to this deal, right? Like, so even the Kyrie Irving deal, you give up that 8th pick and some players, but you still had your picks moving forward. You still had roster flexibility even after giving up those assets. The Cavs obviously aren't going to have that, but I'm with you. I just like the fact that you're kind of investing in that young core. I say all that, you know what's going to happen. Like, Mobley's going to break his foot, never be the same guy again. Garland's going to want out, and Ainge is going to wind up with. But look, I think the bigger picture too, from Ainge's perspective, is he's obviously going with not only Minnesota, but also this deal with Cleveland, going all in on the whole. Just let's accumulate as many picks as we possibly can, and we've seen it with Oklahoma City, and it's really interesting how the NBA has shifted over like the last like 10, 15 years, B-Rob, where it's not necessarily, hey, I need 3 players back in return for my superstar. It's no, like, let's like give me as many picks and as pick swaps as we can possibly do here. And from a GM's perspective, that makes a ton of sense, right? Like, obviously, in terms of bringing back a potential superstar, your best bet is to get it through the lottery. And the second thing is, if you're a GM, hey man, it's some job security. I can sell to you, just wait 2 years once these picks actually accumulate, then we're going to be ready to go, versus bringing back 3 guys, plug and play, and you're like, oh wait, these 3 guys can't play, and that's what we got back in return for our superstar. So you get what Ainge is doing. I understand it. I think this haul that he's getting from Cleveland, I don't know if it's necessarily going to pan out.
Yeah, it's one where, and we'll see again with, there's other, like with Markkanen and Sexton, I think it costs a terms into like how much of their value can you rehab with like a couple strong years in Utah, like in a system where they shine, and then okay, you sell those guys off, and then you really set up for, you know, you're not just relying totally on the picks. You're spinning these guys for more. And again, that was something I think the Celtics did masterfully from like 2014 to 16, essentially, with the Jay Crowders of the world and the guys along those lines, the role players. That even Rondo when he's selling on that. And so, I mean, it's funny. And we look at the total haul the Celtics, I mean, the Jazz got here that they kind of put together for Gobert and Mitchell. It's pretty damn impressive. And I know it's like, I never thought Gobert would get more than Mitchell in a deal, but I think that's kind of what happened here, at least at first. And we'll see how these picks line up. But you're looking at 7 unprotected first-round picks, 3 first-round picks, 2 guys that were drafted in the first round this year. So that's like, we'll give them like 8.5 first-round picks, because since the sticker value on those guys go down to Walker Kessler and Agabi. Jared Vanderbilt, Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley. And they already turned Patrick Beverley into Horton Tucker.
Right. No, it's crazy. Here's the one thing, too, I'll always credit Ainge for, and I think it's one of the things that really separates. I've always thought he's an elite GM. I have, and I think one of his strengths is, B-Rob, is like identifying whether or not, number one, a player is going to put him over the top and really put him closer to a championship, and number two, the proper evaluation of his team. And the fact of the matter is, what is it, 6 straight years I think the Jazz have made the playoffs, but that core was not going to win a championship. And so I think he identified it, like you mentioned. The haul is really impressive. And, again, we saw it with the Celtics time and time again. Like, they were rumored to make some moves. A lot of the moves that he ended up passing on, they would have been splashy, win the day type of trades. I don't necessarily think they would have developed into a move that would have gotten you closer to a championship. So I think he shows restraint with that. And he's also aggressive, I think, when he realizes that his core isn't capable of winning a title. And that's exactly what's happening in Utah, because make no mistake about it, man, he is tearing that thing down to the studs right now.
It is. And there's more to tear down. There's still a lot of guys there. Bogdanovich, Conley, Clarkson, not guys that necessarily don't have much value, but you go into the season, you find teams that need an extra bench piece, and you can cash in on those guys. But this is Ainge at his best when he is in, like you laid out perfectly. Like the same thing when he came into the Celtics job and was like Antoine and Pierce, like, nope, that's not going to work. Like, I'm going to get out of this Antoine contract while I can. And then it's funny, we saw the Pierce KG deal, that dealing the guys when they're kind of past their primes. But this was probably like, if they ever dealt Pierce in his prime in like 2006 or something like that, this is the type of deal that we would have been looking at back then. And obviously it was good that he didn't do it, but it's like, that's what the type of deal he would have made back then.
It is. And I think what's changed, though, too, is like, obviously, like you look at Mitchell, and that's probably your Paul Pierce if you're Utah.
Yeah.
But the league has changed, too. Like, Pierce probably wanted out a little bit with Boston, but not to the extent of what guys can do now. Like, the fact of the matter is you're going to lose that superstar at this point. It's not really on the table to say, hey, sit through this rebuild. You're going to love playing with Ricky Davis, and then we're going to shut you down for, you know what I mean? Like, that's not necessarily in the cards at this point. So it does make sense that he ultimately spends him, gets a nice haul. I don't know about you. Cleveland was not even on the radar when it came to landing spots for Mitchell for me. Didn't see that coming at all. Yeah.
No, because I mean, you think that, again, they're just young enough, and they are, why are you going to go in all in this soon? But then the other side of it is like, you're Cleveland. So it's like, what are you waiting for? Like, you think you're going to get the next big free agent there?
Right.
No.
That's
so it's like, point. Okay, if that's the case, it's like, okay, who's the next star that might become available that we'll have a chance at? Is it going to be better than Mitchell in the next couple of years? Like, maybe, but there's a bunch of other teams that can probably outbid you that if it's a better guy than Mitchell. So they probably like, you know what? F it. Like, let's just roll the dice. He's under control for 3 more years at least. And so to have that kind of stability when you're trading for a star in this kind of a market, I think is huge. And now you look at the East power rankings, and for this season, where do you put them at? You like 4, 5, 6 in the East? Like, I think you pretty safely put them in there, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, Garland's a hell of a player already. Mitchell's an established player, and Mobley, like I mentioned before, I'm incredibly high on. So I just look at that roster. I'm with you. They're absolutely a playoff team. And so I would probably put them in that, 4, 5, 6 range.
So do you like them more? I'll go through some teams here quickly that are going to be in that range. I mean, I think we can agree Celtics, Bucks are at the top. After that, it's kind of a free-for-all for like Sixers. Cavs or Sixers?
I like the Sixers. And this is obviously expecting Joel Embiid to be healthy. I don't know why I'm buying some of the stuff with James Harden.
Been watching James Harden videos
again. Yeah, exactly. So as of now, I like the Sixers better than the Cavs right now. I do.
I agree. So yes, Heat.
I'll still take Miami. I'll say this though, Miami being in the conversation for Durant and being in the conversation for Mitchell, I just was never really sure. Like, what's the package that Miami has to offer any of these teams that's going to...
They didn't have enough picks to do anything.
Thank you. Yeah. No, so never saw that. I'll still take Miami with Butler, Bam, and company, and just the experience that those guys have. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, the Heat culture over the Cavs right now.
The Nets are a wild card. We'll put them to the side. Like Hawks. I feel like that's that's the ultimate like coin flip, Hawks or Cavs right now. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'll go Cavs. I actually kind of like that roster a little bit better. But yeah, I'm with you. That's kind of I think that's kind of the ballpark you're suddenly working in, right? We'll see what happens. Yeah.
And so you look at that now, and from the Suns' perspective, it's like, okay, this is, it's a couple more tougher regular season games against the Cleveland. They're actually going to play them twice in the first 2 weeks of the season, which would be interesting to see. But for me, it's like two things when you look at the impact on the East from a Celtics perspective. It's one, this is a fact, like, I think getting the 1 or 2 seed in the East becomes just all the more important now because you drop to 3, like, this is not an ideal first round matchup for you. Like, this is obviously a series you should win, but like, you're going to have to sweat a little bit if you drop down to that range.
Yeah, absolutely. Like young, fresh legs, like all those guys are young. And then, like you said, too, it's like one of those teams where it's like, we don't really know how big the moment is type of deal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And you're just like, I don't want to have to deal with a team like that. Like you said, I'm not going to have an issue with it, but it would just be a pain in the ass to actually have to play that series. I'm with you 100%.
And now the other question is long term. Like, let's look at the East, let's say 3 years from now. Like, with this young core in place, like, assuredly developing to some degree, like, how high could Cleveland rise by that point if like things go well here? Like, where I don't obviously start seeing them surpassing Milwaukee as long as like Giannis is alive.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, the Heat are getting old. The Nets, who the hell knows what they're going to look like next year, much less like 3 years from now. And then Philly, like, same situation of Harden. Like, it's kind of fascinating to see how that could look like.
Harden, Embiid's health moving forward as well. Yeah, there are questions there for sure. I think a lot of it's going to come down to just how good can Mobley be. What's that ceiling like? Again, like I said, I loved him coming out. Absolutely torched UConn back in the day, and in that 1 year at USC, I was like, this guy's going to be a problem, and he was. And so, really like him. And then we'll see how Garland and Mitchell kind of play together. I don't know if there's a true number one on that team, right? Like, because to me, like, Mitchell isn't that guy. But yeah, the ceiling there is hard. And like you said too, when you look across the landscape of the Eastern Conference, it's the Celtics, the Bucks, and then if you're the Cavs and these guys continue to mature, you're right in that. I think that next conversation for sure.
Okay, last thing on this Mitchell trade, the Knicks obviously missed out here. Do you blame them for not doing this deal, or is this kind of like, yeah, you're gonna have to give 3 first-round picks, and it's probably not going to push the needle for them regardless. You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you're not. If you're I don't know. It's like it doesn't push the needle either way for the Knicks, so you're kind of screwed either way.
Look, I actually kind of respect for them for not going all in on this, because I think a typical Knicks move would be like, yeah, just give them whatever they want. Let's bring in Mitchell and pair him up with Jalen Brunson, and then we got our guys. And look, a core of Brunson and Mitchell, I mean, I guess that, again, wins the back page for, the next few weeks. But does that really get you substantially closer to a championship? I don't think so. It doesn't put you in the conversation. So for them, I don't mind them not necessarily making this move. I know there was obviously a lot of smoke around it, but I go back to what we just talked about with Ainge. There were a lot of times when there were rumors and a lot of deals that could have been made that he passed on, because ultimately he said, I'm going to hang on to these assets because this deal isn't going to get me closer to a championship. Feel like kind of the Knicks, they're going to get roasted for not completing this deal and letting him go to Cleveland. I don't hate it.
I'm a few. It's a situation like, you signed Brunson for all that money. He's not much of a defender. You put Mitchell back there with him, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
In terms of recalibrating your team, especially since you wouldn't have any other way to add to the team,
right,
after you give up the farm for him. So
yeah,
it's just. But now this year, it's like they're going to be really struggling just to make the playoffs.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And how they kind of recalibrate that if they decide to, like, they're going to have to kind of even rebuild some of the assets on their roster to even try to trade the likes of Fournier or, Rando, et cetera. Like, all those guys just took such a step back last year. It's like you're going to have to give up assets to get off those guys. So it'll be fascinating to see just how that plays out in the East. But it's even getting into the play-in tournament for them is not going to be a a walk in the park.
Anyone's stock dropped more than Julius Randle, by the way?
Oh my God!
From the MVP.
Did you ever buy in? Like, here's it, right?
No. It was a nice. It was like a pretty nice story. It was like a spunky team, and then they bounced in the first round. They had a horrible series, and then last year was a disaster. And so that was brutal.
They gave him the big extension though during that. Good job on his agent. His agent,
exactly.
Get better agent than Kevin Durant. All right, let's turn our attention more to the Celtics here to close things out. Danilo Gallinari going to be on the shelf here for what it looks like at least next 2 months after it was a scary meniscus tear in FIBA play overseas for Team Italy, non-contact injury. I'm sure most people have seen it by now, but avoids the ACL tear, gets the meniscus stuff. I assume it'll be a surgery that keeps him out for 2 months. I don't know, Tim. I'd expect the Celtics to be like, you feel ready? Okay, taking out a few 3 or 4 weeks off here, like, because he's a guy who's had a lot of injury and knee issues throughout his career. So that was something you knew, and that was probably one of the biggest, cons of this contract to start. And at least you got the injury out of the way early. Is that the upside here?
Yeah, I mean, look, as long as he's ready for the playoffs, right? Has a few minutes underneath his belt in terms of playing with some of his teammates and ready to go. But yeah, absolutely. When we talk about bringing in Gallinari, and obviously, what's the negative here with the offseason moves that they've made? It's the injury concerns with both guys, right? Sure. And so this was not overly surprising that one of them was going to get nicked up. Like you said, at least it wasn't a season-ending ACL, which is what Twitter explodes, and that's kind of the vibe you got initially. So they avoid that, but like you said too, this was kind of the downside in terms of both moves that you made with Brogdon and Gallinari. And so Gallinari to shut down. I don't know. Look, managing these minutes and managing some of the minutes for everyone on this roster was going to be an issue. Some of this stuff kind of works works itself out moving forward. And so, he does. I'll tell you what, like it's crazy to me that a guy like Gallinari though is playing international basketball with his injury concerns. It's the same thing. Like if I'm Oklahoma City, like, hey, Chet, like, love you, mean it. We're really excited. You're also 7'2", 37 pounds. Like we don't need you playing like all the time in a pro-am game. Too. So some of this stuff still surprises me that we see it in 2022. But it's no question about it. I'd be a little frustrated if I were the Thunder with the Chet Holmgren injury. And for the Celtics, it feels like at least you dodged a bullet here with Gallinari. Yeah.
I mean, the European guys just love to play, and I
love it.
I get it. Like it's you're playing for but at the same time when you're at this age now, it's like, okay, this is
right. You're not 24.
You're not 24.
Yeah.
And Holmgren, like that's a it's a tall glass of water. Like that's, I mean, it's unfortunate because like the court itself was like, obviously they shut the game down like a quarter later. So it's like, maybe you guys should have just shut down before you even started if it was that bad. But that would, if it's a rough scene for that. And I'm with you. I'm kind of surprised at the number of players that are still in it for these games, but that's, again, what are you going to do? You're going to say you can't play, and then maybe you don't get the time in the first place. So that's like,
exactly.
Kind of have to weigh that against it. All right. So who do this will help Ime Udoka a little bit. You kind of referenced it in terms of managing minutes off the bench here, but Grant Williams obviously is going to play a lot here, but I feel there is a kind of an opening there at the backup four, particularly if they want to play big a lot of the time off the bench here. Are you a Sam Hauser guy? You could see, do you like one of these center wild cards that are going to be competing for roster spots and in a battle that is suddenly kind of important because one of these guys is probably going to have to play a decent amount especially when Horford's resting back-to-backs this year? Like, who's your horse in this race? Who do you want to see be the 10th guy off the bench for this team next year?
Yeah, it feels like Boston's high on Hauser, so I'd like to see what he can do kind of on a consistent basis. I was also wondering with you too, like, it'll be interesting to see how this team as a whole just kind of manages the minutes. And I was thinking this even before Gallinari went down, but with Gallinari, with Horford, and with Robert Williams, because those are 3 guys right there. Robert Williams is a guy that, again, track record injury-wise isn't necessarily great. Same thing with Gallinari. And then Al Horford, who was fantastic for you and fantastic down the stretch. He's an older player, and he was also coming off a year where he got shut down, right? So he was fresh going into last year. Like, it's a much different story this season for him. All three of those guys are going to be vital for you if you make this postseason run. So, yeah, I do think that they're going to be managing some minutes of some of these big guys, and a guy like Sam Hauser is certainly someone that could absolutely benefit from it. And I'm with you. I think Grant Williams has a huge opportunity, especially at the start of this season here, to kind of take that next step and take another step forward in his career as well.
You probably saw like his agent doing like a fist pump.
Oh yeah,
Gallinari's gonna be out for a couple months because like otherwise it's like his minutes probably would have been down from last year. Like Gallinari's, was gonna play but at least 20 minutes a game, you'd think.
Yeah.
And now Grant, he's with him being out, and like the Al, I'd be shocked if Al plays back-to-backs this year, like at least semi-regularly. And then Rob Williams too. Like they played him too much last year, and that came back to bite them in the postseason. And with his meniscus injury in April. So now they are very high on Hauser internally. I think they hope that he plays, that he, kind of wins a spot in training camp. And to a degree, it's kind of like Gallinari light from a standpoint of he should be able to hit those threes that Gallinari was going to hit. He's not going to have the rest of an offensive game that Gallinari can kind of bring to the table, but he'll probably be better than defensively than Gallinari, which isn't saying much at this point.
Yeah, low bar,
pretty low bar, but still could come in handy. And then I don't know. There's Luke Cornett fans in the organization for sure. Kevin Gelly played pretty well in summer league. I don't know. It should be a pretty local guy, Noah Vonleh in the mix. So it'll be interesting training camp from that standpoint.
I was very high on Vonleh coming out of Indiana back in the day. 9th overall pick, I think, right?
Yes,
one and done
sure.
in Indiana, and then went 9 and never really put it together in the NBA. But yeah, that's a super skilled big. It was a big that you thought was going to translate. His game kind of translated to today's NBA. Could kind of do it all and handle the basketball a little bit, and just never happened for him. So yeah, we'll see if he can stick.
I mean, and the other easy solution here too. Would you want to see more 3-guard lineups? That kind of they tried last year early. They failed pretty badly with Schroeder and Pritchard around, understandably so. But now at least with Brogdon's a bigger guy. He's 6'5". You could probably play him with the 3, bump up Tatum or Brown to the 4 in some lineups. Would you want to see is that a look you'd want to see? So that you can at least get Pritchard on the floor more?
Yeah, look, I'm up for anything early on in the season. You should be experimenting. See if you can find something here that really hits and moves forward. Like I said, I just think managing the minutes for some of these bigs is going to be vital throughout the post. We saw what a difference it made with a healthy Robert Williams versus a guy that was banged up throughout the postseason. So for me, it's making sure that all those guys are healthy and relatively fresh going into that postseason run. And yeah, absolutely. Tinker, experiment, see if you kind of stumble into something here early on in the season, because ultimately, from a talent perspective here, you're at the upper echelon in the Eastern Conference. I feel like you've fully established yourself as one of those teams now moving forward. There are no oh, you know what, if Tatum and Brown can take those next steps. No, you did it now. You're established. You're that team. So, yeah, see if you can screw around here and find something else to kind of rely on here in terms of a different look and a different lineup.
And managing those minutes should get a little bit easier if they don't come out 20-20 out of the gate.
Yeah,
this time around, and have to be playing catch up
as well, right? Yeah,
but I agree with you. This is again, if you're Ime now, you're experimenting early. You've got a lot of new pieces to play with, and again, one of them is off the court in Gallinari, but that will allow you to look at other looks, lineups, etc. a bit more, while taking some of the onus off the veteran guys. But it's only 3 weeks away, Tim McKone. We're in September. The clock is ticking. Hopefully the Patriots season is still like alive at that point. Right. for regular season, but I think that's it's a question mark at this point. So
we'll see. We'll see how many more Kevin Durant trade requests we get from now until then. We'll see what happens. But I'm sure that Brooklyn training camp's going to be a blast.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure Steve Nash can't wait for that. Yeah.
Oh my, can't wait for that media day.
Yeah.
All right. Make sure you're following Tim McKone on Twitter at Tim_McKone. Check him out. He'll be on all weekend long here at 98.5 Sports Up and throughout weekends all season long and throughout weekdays. I mean, Tim is, I think, the number one guy off the bench for the Sports Hub right now. So or at least one A to Joe Murray. So it's you get a lot of
we
Tim.
got Joe McCarthy. Yeah, that's it. It's never a good thing. If I'm your sixth man, you're in a lot of trouble. We'll put it that way. Yeah, yeah.
No, but check Tim out there. Rate, review, subscribe to the Winning Plays Pod as well, and we'll be back with you guys next week to inch close to the training camp and see what other crazy blockbuster deal goes down to bridge the NBA offseason gap here.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Price for it.
Thanks, bud.